like, I don't know how to do this. I did that before we were recording. All right, folks, so welcome along to the Christmas lightning talks. So we have 8 talks today. First up, we have Frankie or Francesco, who's going to be talking about Are You Really Listening? Then we're over to Geoff Watts, who's doing the human-centric core of agility and its place in the wider system. Making that hard for me to say there, Geoff Watts. Then we're on to Anshul Kapoor, who's talking about motivating people, a case for medals and trophies. We then have Peter Zylka, who's going to the 8 micro habits for better teams. Then we have Robin Hackshall talking about an introduction to 10-pin bowling, how to improve your bowling average. We then have Deidré Luzmore, who's talking about tackling goals, the shared playbook of a rugby scrum versus a scrum team. James Roberts, it's not the size that matters. And then Martin Lambert for long-lived or dynamic teams. So we have a very fast-paced run through of all of these different talks. Each presenter does have 10 minutes. We will, hopefully that'll give a wee bit of time for questions, but there will be around 30 seconds. We will be moving them along then just after that. So please feel free to use the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat as well as other guides. And we can pick up any questions you have from the chat as well for the presenters. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to hand this over to Francesco, who has 10 minutes starting now.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you for being patient, as I'm going to be the first to break the ice of this long, long list of experts from the AMI. 10 minutes, and the clock is already ticking. Whoa. Can you hear me well? Is all okay?
Perfect. Yeah, you're perfect.
Are you listening to me?
Of course.
Are you really listening to me?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Is that true? I bet that maybe some of you are listening or have been listening for the first 10 seconds. But if you hear the same beep that I hear every time someone joins, you're probably not listening to me. You're listening to everything else that happens. And at a certain point, that beep will stop, hopefully. Otherwise, we all go crazy. And at that point, you may be left alone with yourself. And I invite you to, if we can, let's try this experiment with the beeps in the background. Let's try 30 seconds of silence. And I want to hear what you hear. It's hard, isn't it? Remaining in silence while there's some other sound that's going on that captures your attention and brings you somewhere else. And maybe you are in your train of thought and something distracts you. This happens all the time. Now, this was not staged, it just happened. I was not thinking about the noise interruptions, but still they're there. It's very, very hard to isolate ourselves from that. And here we were trying an experiment of 30 seconds. Imagine when you are in a conversation that has not been structured to accommodate that. Can I ask for a volunteer to join me on stage, if they don't mind, for a mini exercise, a mini demo? I did it not one of the AMI guides because they may be too trained in what I'm going to do. A brave person to talk with me randomly about whatever they want for 2 minutes and then listen to me for 2 minutes. Anyone who feels brave enough?
I'll put a hand up.
Sorry, I couldn't see who spoke there.
Hi.
Oh, there's Al. Okay, thank you, Al. Ashley, would you mind spotlighting me and Al as we try this?
Yes.
Thank you for being so brave and courageous. So what we're going to do now, if you're okay with it, and you'll accept at the end once I explain, I'm going to talk for 2 minutes, and you're just going to listen and act And then you're going to talk for 2 minutes, and I'm just going to listen and act. During the first minute, I will act interested. And during the second minute, I apologize in advance. I will on purpose act as distracted as I possibly can. And your job when you talk is to just keep talking straight. Okay? And then we'll swap roles. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. You can pick any topic you want to talk about. Do maybe a little bit less than a minute, just 40, 45 seconds. Any topic you want to talk about, maybe your morning routine, what you've done today, what your plans for Christmas. And you can start whenever you want.
Okay, because it's right in front of me at the moment, we had our team festive do yesterday, so I'm feeling ever so slightly delicate. We had, everyone came here to Bristol. We went bowling, we played shuffleboard, burgers, fries, and generally fun was had by all, I hope. Feedback so far has been good, the ones that have actually survived. What else did we get up to? Oh, we also managed to get a pub crawl going from our games location all the way back to the train station. So we were located ourselves in such a way that was...
What are you doing? Why did you stop? Why did you stop? What happened?
When we stopped drinking, we ran out of money.
Ah, okay. No, why did you stop your flow? You were going so well. You were so, in the zone and talking. Then you started laughing. What happened?
Do you know what? I was just remembering all the fun times we had yesterday. So yeah, my brain got a bit distracted. And yeah, you moving around, and especially with that was fun.
I'm so sorry. It just came to my mind that we were running out of time, and I needed, to give a reminder. I wanted to be considerate. I wanted to help you.
It was, but I think it's also the look on your face. You did it with such joy when you were reminded of the time.
I did. I apologize in advance for this exercise, but actually I do enjoy it a lot. I do enjoy it a lot. Thank you so much, Al. Thank you so much. I'm going to drop the second part of it because that was just to set you up. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay. What happened there? We could ask Al in a longer session, and we do that in our pathways. We would analyze what happened to Al. But we could all see that she changed. She changed the way she interacted the moment I stopped listening, the moment I interjected myself. I forced things, but even if when you're talking to someone, you see them looking at the phone, looking outside the window, checking other things, turning off their webcam, probably your way of talking will change. And the way you talk is determined by the way you think. The listening of the person you have in front, or the people, all the people, the group you have in front, affects your thinking. I'm gonna switch cam if I can, and I wanna share with you some thoughts coming from a person expert in thinking, Nancy Klein specifically. Perfect. And I love this quote from her. She says, "To be interrupted is not good. We've seen that." Sorry for what's going on with the focus. Thank you. To get lucky and not to be interrupted is better. Al would have really enjoyed to be able to tell her story without me, getting in her way. But actually, to know that you're not going to be interrupted, that is categorically different. That is bliss. We never get that. Very, very rarely get that. Sometimes from the people we love, sometimes from a coach, sometimes from other people. Now, if you think about the people we love, they may give us their undivided intention for attention, but that may not be the real thing, because they may think that they know how to listen and they really put all of their heart into it, but they may not. What very often happens is that they're listening in what is called level 1 or internal. And while we are thinking, while we are talking, they're here. They're in their head. And maybe they're thinking here, I'm hungry, maybe here. This posture is terrible, but they're here. It's measured that every 10, 15 seconds, a new thought pops in our head. Much less if we get interruption, like someone joining the session halfway through. We start thinking about something else. If you're very, very good, you're probably thinking, depending on what this person is saying, oh, that happened to me too. Oh, I need to give them their advice. Oh, that's really cool. I need to remember to compliment with them. What ideally we would like to give as a gift to the people we love, or our clients that we love in a different way, is the gift of listening in level 2 or even 3. In level 2, we do what's called focused listening. We forget about ourselves. We are still here, like we don't disappear. We're still humans, but all our attention is toward the person and what they're saying. We are analyzing, we are curious, and we are giving them space to explore their thoughts. Questions and the thoughts in our head move from I to they, or he or she. The questions we ask are usually open, the powerful questions that we know from coaching. There's a third level that is typically combined with 2, that happens contextually, which is level 3, and that's called global. And in this case, we are not so much focused on the content. That's good. We're still thinking about them. We still have some perception of the content, but we're thinking about the person in their entirety. What's going on in the environment around them? What's going on inside them? Are they happy? Are they sincere? Do they need support when they share that? Do they expect me to cheer? Do they expect me to hug them? They are not voicing anything, but I can still hear it. I would invite you to one last experiment. Let's be silent for 30 seconds and listen to your own mind. You can listen to yourself.
That's great. Thank you. Your time is up. Thanks very much, Francesco. If you want to stop sharing, and
yes,
I will go over to next up. We have Geoff Watts. Geoff, you should be all ready to share. Geoff, are you there? We lost Geoff.
No, I'm still here. I'm still here. Just trying to get the old screen sharing going over 2 devices. So that should be there. Right, cool. Thank you, Frankie. Thank you, everybody else. Apologies for the slight change of pace. Mine's going to be not as calm and as measured as Frankie's. I want to talk to you about something that perhaps on the face of it might not be particularly eyebrow raising. A lot of you are probably thinking, well, Agile is human-centric already. Yeah, people over process and all that. Well, I'm here to tell you maybe not so much. And even if it is, perhaps not enough. So my aim here is to explore the concept of human centricity with you, both in Agile terms, but if you'll just indulge me a little bit, wider societal terms. This talk came about, it's a grand term, isn't it, for 10 minutes of me just blurbing at you. It came about after a whole host of conversations over the last few months, but most in particular, one person who's on the call, who I'll come back to later on, and someone else, John Kern, who was a signatory of the Agile Manifesto when I was in Serbia a couple of weeks ago, got me thinking about this topic quite a lot. So here's my agenda. What is human centricity from my perspective? Why it's important, and a little bit of a call to action should you choose to go along with it. So here we go. My view about human centricity. What is it? Basically, putting people at the center of what we do, prioritizing people, their needs, their emotions, their aspirations above non-human things. Pretty simple. My view also is that it's about acknowledging that at the heart of every successful project, every successful team, organization, society are people, at least until the robots take over. And they've all got their own strengths, they've all got their own challenges, they've all got their own needs and their own rights. And being human-centric is about putting that humanity with its amazing wonders and inevitable flaws right at the middle of everything that we do. John Kern in Serbia actually talked about putting people back on top. I prefer the word center, but I think it's the same kind of thing. I believe this is how things naturally start in human world. And with all things being equal, I think it's what we will naturally revert back to when we can. So that's my definition of human centricity. Why is it important? Well, you probably can't escape a lot of the doom mongering right now. Agile's dead, robots are taking over, planet dying, safe, and all of that. A lot of it is probably valid. Okay, that maybe we are on course for extinction. Maybe we are our own worst enemy. And I can kind of think that maybe if we don't put humanity back in the focus, then yeah, I think we are headed for some severe consequences or doom and gloom. But an overly used phrase. Is it overly used? It's used a lot, maybe appropriately so. With great power comes great responsibility. Humans and the decisions that we've made have arguably put the world into a bit of a pickle. Normal world, outside world, agile world, and it's our responsibility to do something to get us out of it. But a lot of people will say to me, Geoff, we can't. How can we do that? We don't have the power to do that. We're just little people. We're just team members. We're just Scrum Masters. We're just product owners. We're just developers. We don't have that kind of responsibility to do anything. And we're being asked to do more with less, more quickly, a lot of the time. So there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way of us being able to put humans back into the center of things. Rules, other people's decisions, norms, expectations, our short-term fears and short-term gains and self-preservation. All these things get in the way. And it's very easy to feel powerless. And in a way, we actually crave the feeling of powerless. That might sound a bit strange, but if we feel powerless, then we can kind of abdicate our responsibility to act. And I was telling somebody a bit of an analogy here. In our house, the recycling, we've had a debate many, many times over the years about whether it's actually worth us washing out our yogurt pots and turning the lights off and all that. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We can't be sure. We can have our views, but we can't be sure. What we can be sure of is that it's probably the right thing to do. And I believe it helps. I think if we see our neighbors putting out their recycling, it encourages us, it validates us. They see us putting out our recycling. It's a bit of a ripple effect. We can see the statistics about the number of waste going to landfill goes down, keeps us going. But if we believe there's no point, and say we've had this debate in our household multiple times, what's the point in us washing out our yogurt pots when all this is going on in the world? If we think our actions don't matter, then it makes it easier for us to just not bother. And that's nice for our lazy side of ourselves. But these challenges, they're not going away. And I think we've got a choice. We've got a choice about whether to accept them, just leave them as they are, take the consequences that come, or accept the challenge to do what we can to change them. I'm not just talking about recycling here, okay? I think the choices we make do matter. I think they do have an impact. I think whether those decisions are about recycling now so that people will never meet, have a better world, or whether it's about decisions to make a little bit more psychological safety in the workplace. By being more human-centric, we can change the world around us, even if it's a little bit, even if it's just a case of we're not as big a part of the problem. All right. Ideally, we can be part of the solution, but even if it's just being a smaller part of the problem and being able to finish the end of the week, finish the end of the year and think, do you know what? I did good things. I did things right this year, this week, this day. So that's where we're going with this. I think if I were to ask you whether you think you're human-centered, most of you would probably say, yeah, I think I am. I think I do care. I think I do act in ways that speak to human centricity. And as much as I love you, and as much as I think that's true, I think that's not enough. We've always, for a long time, we've known that Agile isn't the destination. It's a journey, a continuous agility. Mastery isn't an end state, but it's an endless pursuit of something. Just like human centricity. It's never going to really get there. We're never going to become the perfect person, the perfect team, the perfect world, the perfect society, but we can get ourselves on that journey. When it's an emergency, we do that quite naturally, whether it's a crisis in a natural disaster or whether it's a crisis at work. Agile is a natural response. Get a cross-functional team together, give them the environment support they need, let them get the job done, all that stuff. It's always been about people, but it's not easy. When we are in difficult, trying circumstances. If you're interested in this analogy more, then I'm not going to be able to do it justice here. It's from a book by a guy called Tim Urban, talks about the thinking ladder. Basically, higher level thinking, when we're at our best, we think like scientists. We're curious. We want our ideas to be tested. We want to explore. But when we're under threat, we think more with our primitive minds, tunnel vision, cognitive biases. We tend to see more disconnect. We tend to see more acting in self-interest, self-preservation. And this is perfectly natural, perfectly normal, but it's not the opposite. It's not about unchecked compassion. We need discipline for freedom to work. We need discipline for human centricity to work, even if it's just to avoid our natural short-term hedonism taking over. That idea of, I really want that donut, regardless of the long-term consequences. Forcing ourselves to think like scientists and for the long term isn't easy. So how do we go about doing it? Well, I've got four pillars, I think. Again, this is just Geoff. I'm not an authority on this. But rationalizing with yourself what you believe it means to be human to one another. First of all, what do I think it means to be human to one another? Think about that, and then open yourselves up to having that conversation with other people and letting your view morph, mold, evolve with other people. And be curious. So this is my first pillar, curiosity. Agile has always been about setting aside our predictions, our predictive planning, our assumptions, and trying to find things out empirically. And we need that more than ever. There's a perception in some places that it's been around for 20 odd years, so it's mature and it's clear and it's obvious, but it's not. It's never been so complex. And complexity needs curiosity. We also need cross-functionality. Again, Agile has always been about getting people from different disciplines to solve that problem end to end, not just do your bit. Complex problems need to be solved by people from different disciplines. They have a common thread, in our sense, human centricity, humanness, humanity, that purpose, that philosophy, and then having the courage to do something about it, to challenge the status quo, to be the first person to say, I'm going to wash out my yogurt pots. I don't care if nobody else does it because it's the right thing. And be different and stand out and put your box at the end of the drive that's now normal, but for a while wasn't. And then the fourth pillar, compassion for other people whose opinions you're going to invite in. You're going to create the space for those opinions to be heard, to be understood, to be empathized with, empower them when they don't feel comfortable being empowered, but also having compassion for yourselves, because having your assumptions challenged isn't easy. Sitting in the ambiguity and the uncertainty is unsettling. And then just making these things not just buzzwords. So my call to action is have a look in the mirror, be curious, be open, challenge your assumptions about what it means to be human, about how human-centric you are being, what the limitations are for you being more human-centric, and then reach out beyond your own network, beyond your own functional silos, beyond your own like-minded group, your own echo chamber. Connect with other people. If that resonates with you and you want to know more and potentially being part of something, then I said I would mention one person who's on the call today, Valerie McLean. She's set up well, I won't tell you what she set up. I'm going to leave it a little bit more curious, but you can find out more information about her human-centered initiative by clicking that link, following that QR code, getting in touch with her afterwards. I believe that's my 10 minutes.
It is. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Geoff. Just very quickly, because I know Geoff has to leave before the end of the session. Are there any questions for Geoff on that? There was none came in. No, that's okay.
Can you pop the link in the chat?
Pop it? Yeah.
No worries.
Thanks very much, Geoff. All right, thank you, Geoff, for that. Next up, we have Anshul Kapoor. Anshul, you should be co-host.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Angela. Oh, I have a problem with Frankie and Geoff. they are such a hard act to follow, and it's irritating. Okay, never mind. Let me see what I can do. So there you go. I'm going to talk about motivating people, the oft-repeated phrase, and I'm going to make a case for medals and trophies. So let's see if I'm able to convince you all. I'll start off with a short story. So there was a team that was building a product, a mobile app, and it was the last day of a 2-week sprint for them. And they went up to their Scrum Master and they said that, in this sprint, we've done a lot more than just the forecast for the sprint, the backlog items. What we've done is we've made a major improvement to our deployment process and all the things around it. And we kind of deserve a trophy for this. And while the Scrum Master was listening to this, an idea popped into his head, and he said, okay, the sprint review is in about an hour. Let's see what we can do about it. The Scrum Master rushed out of the office, went into a store nearby, and he kind of found a vase that looked a little bit like this. It wasn't really a trophy, but he wanted to give to the team something that looked like a trophy. So he picked up a vase, he picked up some food stuff, some chocolates and all that, and some beer, which is very important. And he kind of created a trophy. And then during the sprint review, which went very, very nice, the team was super excited, and they talked about, this big improvement that they had brought about over and above the sprint forecast that they had made. And so the Scrum Master and the product owner, they handed over this trophy to this team. The team loved it, and the sprint review was a great success. Now, in the following sprint review, what happened was one of the other teams that was also part of the same product group was also talking about some of the great work that they did during that sprint. And upon listening to that, this original team that had gotten the trophy the previous time, they decided that it sounds like this team deserves a trophy this time. So what they did was they took that trophy that they had gotten, filled it up with a lot of other whatever food stuff they could gather over there, and they handed it over to the next team. And then before you know it, the trophy kind of became a rotating trophy, and it kind of became the talk of the town, talk of the organization, let's say. And it came to be known as the continuous improvement trophy. And it kind of became very prestigious. All the teams in that product group and even beyond heard about it and became very curious about it, became a phenomena of sorts in that place. And that Scrum Master, whenever he used to look at this trophy being handed over from one team to another, would just smile and wonder, how can this vase that he had just rushed out and found and filled it up became such a symbol, in that organization. Now, this story got me very interested in this topic. How is it that something as simple as this can really become, a sort of a phenomena in that organization? And so I started reading up on a lot of research on this topic, on the topic of rewards and incentives and prizes. And in particular, I came across this research that was published around 2019, about 4 years ago, in the Journal of Business Ethics, called the Pied Piper: The Prizes, Incentives, and Motivation Crowding In. One thing that stood out from that research was that the rewards, as a broad category, can be divided into two distinct sort of pillars. One is what we call as incentives, and the other one is what we call as prizes. Now, there are 4 criteria based on which you can differentiate between incentives and prizes. The first one is the monetary content of the reward. So in case of incentives, they typically have a monetary or a material nature, and size matters, which means higher the monetary value or the material nature, higher that reward is considered to be. Whereas prizes is something that has non-monetary nature. It has a symbolic value, which outweighs the extrinsic values. The prize will have a little bit of, let's say, monetary value, a small one, like in case of that trophy still cost a little bit of money. But the symbolic value outweighs the extrinsic value. So that's one criteria. The second one is the publicity. So usually incentives are handed out privately. There's not a lot of publicity about it. People don't know what's the exact incentive award or the quantity of that incentive that's been handed out. Whereas prizes are awarded at public ceremonies, or at least in a group of people. Okay. The third criteria is the degree of discretion in awarding that reward. So in case of incentives, it's contingent, and there's typically a straight line path, or more or less a straight line path, in terms of you do this, this, and this, and you will get the incentive. Okay, so people can anticipate with certainty that if we follow certain criteria, if we fulfill certain criteria, we will get this incentive. Whereas in case of prizes, it's different. There is a very high degree of discretion from the side of an awarder. So the awarder decides whether they want to give it, don't want to give it, when they want to give it, they decide. And there is uncertainty for the awardee, because there's no set criteria or a checklist that you can follow. If I do this, this, and this, that's when I'll get the prize. All right. So there is a difference on that aspect. And the fourth one is on the purpose of the task itself. So in situations where there's little or no intrinsic motivation, incentives can induce extrinsic motivation. Whereas for prizes, they are generally awarded to those who have achieved goals due to intrinsic motivation. So people do something out of intrinsic motivation, like in the case of that team that did some systemic improvement, and that is awarded through a prize. Okay, so these are broadly the two categories under rewards, and they're different in all these four aspects. So you can imagine it to be like a rewards continuum. On one side, or on the one extreme, is the incentives, and on the other extreme are the prizes. So an annual bonus that is typically handed out in a lot of organizations is the perfect example of an incentive. You know, it's private, it's not public. The greater the bonus, the monetary value, the greater it is considered as the size of the incentive, and so on. Whereas the trophy story that I talked about, or that improvement trophy that became a phenomena in that organization, is an example of a prize. Now, most rewards that are handed out, especially in the corporate setup, are somewhere in the middle. They're actually a hybrid of an incentive and a prize. Even if you take the example of sports, let's say a cricket match, at the end of the cricket match, typically there's a player of the match awarded to one of the persons who does well in the match, or a football match. Now this player of the match typically comes with a cash award. So there is that cash monetary value of the prize, which makes it closer to incentives. However, it is given out in a public ceremony, which makes it closer to being a prize. So it's got features of both. So it's kind of a hybrid example. Like I said, most rewards that are typically handed out these days in corporate setups fall somewhere in between that continuum. Now, the key thing that kind of stood out for me from all the research that I went through, and in particular this one, is that prizes crowd in motivation. Now, what does that mean? That prizes and incentives, they affect motivation in people in different ways. Prizes can crowd in motivation, which means that the effects of these prizes are resilient, and they will persist even when the reward is withdrawn, which is nothing short of magic, to be honest. Like in the case of that trophy that was moving around from one team to another, once a team got that trophy, even if they handed it over to another team, the motivational impact of that trophy continued to stay with that team. And that's the kind of magic that only prizes can do. Neither incentives nor the hybrid forms can achieve that effect on people and teams. And so therefore, that makes the category of prizes a really magical category of rewards. Incentives, of course, do not have that effect. So my call to action, in a way, if you
10
haven't
seconds.
found it yet,
Yeah, 10 seconds.
if you haven't
Anshul.
found it, yes. If you haven't found it yet, find or design the prize that you can to bring that magic to your teams. If you already have it, share your story with me. I would love to hear about it. And I close it there. All right, thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Anshul. I think the one question I seen come in, somebody answered it. So thank you very much. Any other questions for Anshul? No? All right, great. Thank you very much. Peter, you are up next.
Thank you. Thank you also, Anshul. I will start my timer, and this will be quite a challenge because usually I give this one in 60 minutes. So I have 10 minutes apparently, which shouldn't be a problem. So what I would like to introduce you to is something I've learned from a talk that I attended in Switzerland, and since then looked through it and am amazed by the concept. So I would also invite you to something. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, could also be a digital copy, have something ready to write, because what I will share with you are 8 micro habits for better teams, or you could say better teamwork. And this is all based on the mutual learning mindset by Roger Schwartz, which you can read more about in his book, The Skilled Facilitator. And these 8 micro habits that I will share with you are based on values. Values that are transparency, curiosity, informed choices, accountability, and compassion. So whenever I will share those micro habits, you will see one or more of these values being part of it. And also what I've found in a lot of teams where I'm using these micro habits is that it becomes even more valuable if you have a team where you don't have a common native language. So you will see some communication tweaks there as well. So I have 8 minutes left, 8 micro habits should work, 1 minute per micro habit. So number 1, state views and ask genuine questions. The first question is here, what is a genuine question? And I would like to answer it with telling you something that the author shared later on what is not a genuine question. And for this, he developed a test. The test goes as follows. If you can ask a question and add a "you idiot" to it by the end, and it still sounds like a good structured sentence, then it's probably not genuine. Like, for example, do you really think this will work? You idiot. Sounds quite reasonable. This is where he's saying, like, hey, maybe you reconsider your question and ask a genuine question. So don't hide a question, don't hide a statement in a question. Instead, state your view and then ask a genuine question. This could be something along this line. I think we should start the project with a small number of key customers so that we can identify problems. What concerns, if any, do you have with starting small? I can state my view, I can be open, and still ask a genuine question. If I just hide my view in a question, it's not really genuine. And what I start doing then is not really being interested even in the other parts. So my curiosity is not really there. So again, the idea of being curious, so stating my view and then asking a genuine question, which makes for a lot of better conversations in teams. Number 2, share all relevant information. Also, when they do not support your argument. Why is this important? When we work with teams, we like to share information. But why is it important to really share all the information? Because then the team can really make conscious decisions about, hey, what is it that we are going to do? If we hide information from them, if we don't give them all relevant information to make a decision, we might be surprised after a while or after some weeks, or we go like, oh, but I didn't expect it that way. a lot of times you could go back and see, like, because not all relevant information were shared with the team. A good example is like, hey, I think we should delay the project until January. I mean, maybe that's also reality for some of us here in the call, because it will balance our workload. But there is someone saying that our costs will increase by 4% if we wait. With this, the team now has all relevant information. And now we can really make a conscious decision on, hey, what are some of the options on what we could actually do? Number 3, use specific examples and agree on what important words mean. And this is what I meant, especially when you work with people where we don't have a common native language, it becomes even more important. And also in our agile bubble that we are in, a lot of times I even challenge myself. I'm saying words, I'm saying a lot of buzzwords and think, I mean, everyone understands them, right? But it's sometimes super important to make sure it's like, hey, when I say this and this word, what I mean with this is ... So agree on what important words mean. Also, when we do exercises with teams on what values are important to us, and I see respect on it. Let's agree on what respect means, because respect might mean one thing to me and another one to a colleague. So let's use specific examples on, hey, when I say respect, this is what I mean. This is behavior that to me shows respect. As an example, also, when I say consensus, I mean that everyone on this team can say they will support and implement a decision given their roles and responsibilities. Which also means in a talk, in a meeting, when there was something mentioned, it's okay to say, it's like, hey, what is the word? What does it mean to you? Can we agree on what it means before we continue a conversation? And one person thinks we are talking about A, and the other person goes like, yeah, I understood, it's B. So how can we align this understanding? Number 4, explain reasoning and intent. My favorite, because it's a super easy hack. So what I do nowadays in whatever chat tool we are using is when I ask a question, I always follow up with the reason I'm asking is ... Imagine you are coming into the office and you see a message from myself saying like, hey, have you reserved this room? Depending on your day, you might be completely frustrated and say, like, what is Peter doing again? Why is he asking me that question? If I would have given more reasoning for my question, maybe I can take all the stories out of your head already, and you could just simply respond, yes, I've booked this room, and we could continue the conversation. We wouldn't need to go into a discussion, but could just easily continue a conversation. Hence, some hacks. The reason I'm asking is, here's how I reached my decision. Here's what led me to do this. The reason I'm saying this ... So even in written communication, it can be very, very helpful. Number 5, focus on interests, not positions. I've seen one of my friends here in this call, Frank. So if Frank and I, if we would be sitting in a room together, Frank would be all in for having a window open, and I would be all in for having a window closed. It would probably be quite difficult for us to reach an agreement, because all we do is focus on interest. But if I'm asking Frank, it's like, Frank, why is it so important for you to have the window closed? He could say, actually, because I have all the paper lying around and I don't want this paper to fly around. In return, he could ask me, why is it for you, Peter, important to have the window open? And I'll say, like, I need fresh air. I'm having, it's warm in here. And then now we can move away from, okay, what could be a solution that works for both of us? So when you see someone is focused on a position in your team, you could ask, what is it about the solution that's important to you? I'm asking because if we can identify this, we can help meet your needs. Following up with a genuine question as well, and explaining intent. Number 6, one of my favorites. I don't know how many assumptions I'm doing a day. I'm having a lot of them. Could be a daily, and one of my team members is just looking weird. Let's put it like this, weird when I say something. And I could go all day long about making stories up of why this was that case. Maybe he's angry with me. Maybe I should have done something. Maybe I said something. And these stories get better with time. So what can I do instead? I can test my assumption and simply approach him and say, like, hey, this is what I've observed. What's going on? Is there anything going on? And with that, I can finalize my story usually very quickly, because he could say something simply as like, oh no, I was just reacting to something that was happening at home. And a lot of times the story ends there. So making sure to test your assumptions regularly instead of going into a story building. Number 7, jointly design next steps. If it's about what do we do until the next meeting, how do we want to move over to the next point, jointly design next steps together with the team. I think we are ready to move on to the next item. Is anyone not ready to move on? Making sure, again, we are aligned in a team or as a group, and then together can move to the next point. Moving to the next point and also to the last micro habit is probably the one where I would encourage everyone not to start with, because it's the most difficult one. Discuss undiscussable issues. And with that, I mean not in the kitchen with 2 or 3 people, but really with the group. Still, it can turn into something very toxic very quickly. Hence, the approach to raise issues when they pop up, using tools like nonviolent communication and things like, hey, what is the reason? Maybe there are a lot of assumptions behind this, but really discussing them before they become very ugly and are maybe not able to be solved anymore. Those are 8 micro habits. Like I said, I like to experiment a lot with them, maybe 1 micro habit at a time or each sprint. And with that, I think my timer is off. Very looking forward to see in the chat maybe what your favorites were. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. Bang on time. Fantastic. Have we any questions for Peter? No, lots of applauses there. So lovely stuff. Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing the 8 micro habits. And I'll pass it along to Robin. Robin, you're next up here.
Oh, I've been very impressed by the way that everybody has absolutely been bang on 10 minutes pretty much. And I'm either going to finish in about 4 minutes or take about 40. So
you won't have 40.
I know I won't have 40.
We done a 10.
But we'll make sure it's on there. So I must apologize to Al, who went bowling yesterday. And this talk is all about how you could improve your bowling average. So this has come a day too late. Yeah, I'm really, really sorry. So, but there is an agile twist to this and everything we go through. So for some context, we all have misspent youths, and mine was spent in a bowling alley. So I actually started 10-pin bowling when I was 15. And it was just on a Saturday morning at the sort of youth bowling club that we had. And then I started bowling a lot more in lots of leagues and became a British 10-pin Bowling Association Phase 1 instructor when I was sort of 16, and then sort of represented Essex at the Inter-County Championship. So I did a lot of bowling when I was younger. And from that, I've learned a few things. And so I wanted to use this talk to introduce sort of some of those little things that you might be able to do to help you when you're bowling, but there is that agile twist. So they may also help assist and support you with your agile ways of working. So a bit of overview. I'm sure most of you are aware of what 10-pin bowling is, but we'll start with a quick overview. So bowling is an iterative sport. Where the aim is to score as close to 300 as possible. So you would do that by getting a strike in every frame. And you would beat your opponents or your opposing team's score in the process. Now, in each of those 10 frames, the bowler gets 2 attempts to knock down as many pins as they can. Knock them all down the first time, you get a strike and there'll be a nice X appear on the screen. But if you're unsuccessful, that's not a problem. You've got another opportunity to knock down the remaining pins on the second attempt and you would get a spare. And there's a scoring system that goes with this that adds it all up to a nice total at the end. And obviously this iterative approach that we can see, we've got those 10 separate segments where we can have our turn to bowl, is something you actually see in agile frameworks such as Scrum, is that we work in those iterations like sprints. So there's our start of our analogy there. So here's a typical bowling lane. It's 60 feet long, it's 42 inches wide, and there are 39 boards that go across from gutter to gutter. So a bit of a quick question now. When you're bowling, I can ask Al because she was bowling yesterday, where were you aiming? Where do you aim?
The middle.
The middle? Oh, okay. So
Slightly left.
Slightly left. Cool. Any other takers? Whereabouts do you aim?
Just off center.
Off center. But what are you looking at when you're aiming?
The pins.
Oh, looking at the pins, Ashlyn.
Yeah, I'm rubbish at bowls, by the way, so don't take my advice. But yeah, the pins.
So this is my first tip: is you don't aim at the pins. It seems really counterintuitive, and some of the stuff I'm going to say is counterintuitive, but don't aim at the pins. What you want to do is aim at the arrows. So obviously on the screen, sort of just middle bottom, you'll see 7 arrows going across. They are between sort of 12 and 15 feet away. So you want to, from the foul line, so you want to aim at those. If you can't hit something that's 15 feet away, how do you expect to hit something that's 60 feet away? It's that short-term goal. It's that sprint goal, if we put that agile hat on. You want to hit something. If you've got this big project you want to deliver, but you don't hit your sprint goals, you're probably never going to deliver that big project at the end. So actually, if we want to hit those if we want to deliver that project, aim for that sprint goal, aim for those arrows. Continually achieving or hitting those short-term goals is going to create that predictable environment for you from which you can inspect and adapt. So that's your agile tip. Focus on your sprint goals. Right, a little video for you now. It's only sort of a few seconds long. Oh. So in that video, I was lucky enough to get a strike there. But how many pins did I actually hit with the ball? Should have asked you to watch closely.
3. 2 or 3.
Any advances?
4. Couple of 4s in the chat.
Yeah. So the answer is 4. So to get a perfect strike, you only need to hit 4 pins. So if you're right-handed, normally you'd come in from the right-hand side and you'd hit the head pin, number 1, and that pin would then take out pins 2, 4, and 7. The ball then hits pin number 3, which takes out 6 and 10. Ball hits 5, which then takes out number 8, and then the ball takes out number 9. So you only actually need to do 4 out of 10 things to knock them all down. So obviously that next bowling tip is you're going to aim for that pocket between the head pin and the pin next to it. Obviously, if you're left-handed, you would aim between 1 and 2. Right-handed, aim between 1 and 3. But where's the agile analogy in this? Well, here you don't need to touch everything to deliver value. So if you've got that big backlog full of stuff, you're going to prioritize those things that have got the most value in it. So obviously the priority for me is to make sure I hit those 4 pins. But sometimes actually I might be hitting my arrow and sort of aiming in the right place, but I'm not getting things right. I might be missing the pocket, not coming in at the right angle. And that means I might need to sort of change my starting position. So I'll use all of those boards where I am to sort of think, where am I going to start my approach? Where am I going to finish my approach? And I might then move left or right, inspect and adapt, make those small adjustments to actually sort of continually improve and make sure I'm getting those strikes. And that sort of brings us that sort of agile tip number 3. We want to continually identify those improvements, implement those small changes so that you can understand the impact of that change. And those starting and ending positions might be our definition of ready or our definition of done. And actually, obviously, if we're not completing everything within a sprint, we can actually look at why we're not completing things. Have we not got enough information to begin with that's blocking us during there? Or is our sort of definition of done not strong enough to actually get us to completion? Going to continue with a bit more counterintuitiveness. This time, oh, why did that not play? That should be playing a video. I don't know what's going. It should be my daughter getting a spare when we were bowling. So again, that counterintuitive nature, but spares can be better than strikes. So although the aim of the game, the aim of the sport, is to get as close to 300 as possible by knocking down all those pins each time you step up in each frame, a lower score may be sufficient to beat your opponents. Now, I'm not promoting sandbagging in any way and sort of underperforming, but you can get a score of 190 without getting a strike. And the same thing could be aligning sort of to an MVP when we're thinking in that agile way of working. In that actually, yeah, that gold-plated, diamond-studded solution is scoring 300, but something slightly less might be appropriate in order to win the game. So actually just making sure we complete everything in every iteration is actually going to get us further on. So I put all this onto a nice sort of slide at the end. How to improve your bowling average along with those agile metaphors. So remember, it's that iterative sport. And agile frameworks like Scrum are also iterative. We want to score as close to 300 as possible, and that's our product vision. We're going to aim for the arrows. We're going to focus on those sprint goals. We're going to sort of try to hit that pocket and identify those items that deliver most value. We're going to adjust our feet or the target. We're going to inspect, continually inspect and adapt, and improve and evolve. And spares are better than strikes. We're going to embrace counterintuitive approaches. So there you go. That was your introduction to 10-pin bowling, how you're going to go away and improve your bowling average, and also have some agile metaphors that you can share with your squads.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. You actually finished 20 seconds early, so great.
Oh,
Good stuff. So guys, any questions? There's lots of chat there from everybody just saying they love the analogies. It's never going to be the same again for them going bowling with their teams. Do we have any questions from anybody for Robin? No? Okay, thank you so much. So I will hand over now to Deidré.
Hi,
Talk to tackling goals. Great.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, no problem. Yeah, you're all good.
Lots of analogies and metaphors today in these lightning talks. So now I'm going to continue on that and those analogy and metaphor lines. And I'm going to talk about, let me start my clock here. I'm going to talk about tackling goals, the shared playbook of a rugby team versus a Scrum team. So, hi, AMI Meetup members, welcome to this talk, the lightning talks. So imagine a rugby pitch. This is the first view of the pitch as I entered the Orange Velodrome in Marseille with mom and dad and husband back in, October it was now. I flew my parents over to South Africa. I bought tickets for my dad's 70th birthday to a World Cup rugby match in France. I know I'm the model daughter. Our seats were about there where I've highlighted the red circle. So right on the try line. Can you imagine our excitement? So again, as I said, imagine the pitch, the intensity, the strategy, the teamwork. Now think of your Scrum teams. Surprisingly, these two different worlds intersect more than you might think. So let's explore the parallels between a rugby Scrum and a Scrum framework. But first, because it's Christmas, let's interject a little joke. Rugby versus Scrum. So what do you call another Springbok Rugby World Cup win? I call that a scrumptious performance. Another slide here. This is the fam. This is us, mom, dad, husband, outside the stadium, already enjoying a pint before the game. So in the heart of a rugby match, the Scrum is a critical moment. It's a tactical play that restarts the game. Did you know that? I didn't know this until the day I flew my dad over to France for a rugby match in real life. And I asked him, Dad, so what is what the purpose of the Scrum was? As a little girl, I watched rugby
with my dad on the weekends. My dad is not much of a talker. He mostly shouts at the players, at the TV, because he knows best. And so I never asked him about the rules. And he never really explained it to me. I was just all caught up in the whole shouting of it and the excitement, and the scoring and the jumping up and down and the cheering. But walking to the Marseille Stadium on match day, past those die-hard fans enjoying a well-earned roadside pint, I asked my dad, well, Dad, I work with Scrum teams every day, but what is the purpose of the Scrum in rugby? And he said, my girl, it restarts the play. It restarts the play. And the penny dropped. The rugby Scrum is literally the moment of the reset, just like the start of a sprint. So what is it? It's a powerful display of unity, coordination, strategy, with each player playing a pivotal role. A rugby Scrum is an opportunity for the team to refocus, adapt their strategy, and each sprint in our Scrum framework mirrors this. At the end of every sprint, through the retrospectives that we do with our teams and through sprint planning, we reassess our strategy and our goals. And this cyclical nature of reflection and adaptation is fundamental, and it's one of those fundamental aspects of both the rugby Scrum as well as our Scrum sprints. It's all about continuous improvement and learning from each play and each sprint and applying these lessons. So the very concept, this concept might have been what inspired Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber when formulating the Scrum framework. I don't know this for sure. I've not spoken to them. And if anybody on this call has and knows, please mention something in the chat or reach out to me afterwards. But I think it sounds quite likely. I think Scrum as a word could have been a deliberate choice by them, but because it can symbolize so much more than just the restart of a play. So I'm going to go through some parallels, which I've thought of. So teamwork. Consider the rugby Scrum. Each player from the hooker, oh no, please excuse the pretty woman slide, not that sort of hooker, but the legendary All Blacks hooker on the right, Dane Coles, as he's about to show his mastery of the draw in this photograph. So where was I? Right, so each player from the hooker to props, from the flanker to the scrum half, they have a specific role, yet their success relies on a collective effort. This mirrors the Scrum teams, the development team, if you think about it, the product owner, the Scrum Master, they all need to work in unison, much like that well-oiled rugby team on the field. Their roles differ, but you know what? Their goals are singular, I think. And it's all about delivering value through to that successful sprint to the goal. I think it's a lovely photograph there of that jump and sprint. Look at his hair. It's fantastic. Roles and responsibilities. So once again, the hooker, the loose prop, the tight head prop, the left wing, the fullback, they each play a distinct role in the Scrum, contributing their unique skills and to a common purpose. So similarly, I think in our Scrum teams, that we have the product owner, which shapes the vision and prioritizes the backlog and guides the team. The Scrum Master acts much like a rugby coach, facilitating and supporting the team. And the development team, I would think, would be akin to the players in the Scrum, working together to turn the vision into that tangible product increment. I think the synergy of roles and responsibilities is pivotal in both contexts, don't you think? Next parallel, adaptability. In rugby, there's flexibility and adaptability is key. The team must quickly adjust and based on their opponent's actions in the play. Similarly, in Scrum, adaptability is crucial. Teams need to be ready to pivot based on customer feedback. This agility is in response to evolving circumstances and is the hallmark of both, I think, the successful rugby team and the effective Scrum team. Communication. Communication is the backbone of a rugby team. Don't you like the All Blacks there doing the haka? Quite scary. their communication is clear. We will obliterate you. Players must coordinate without the luxury of time. This mirrors the communication, I think, in the Scrum teams during the daily stand-ups and during sprint planning. Clear, concise communication that everyone is aligned to. And what about commitment? I think in a rugby Scrum, commitment is non-negotiable. Each player must fully commit their role in the Scrum to succeed. And this is directly applicable to Scrum teams, I think. What do you think? Each member must commit to their tasks, to their sprint goal, and to helping out their teammates. Each sprint we undertake is not just a phase of work, but it's a reflection of a deeper philosophy, drawing inspiration from that rugged rugby field. So let's look at some broader lessons. So after considering these 5 parallels, adaptability, communication, commitment, and restarting of the sprint, I want to ponder some broader lessons. Number 1, the resilience in the face of challenges. Rugby players demonstrate immense resilience, bouncing back from physical and strategic setbacks. Scrum teams can adopt this resilience in facing these challenges. Also, continuous learning. Rugby teams constantly analyze their game and their performance and their technique, much like our Scrum teams have retrospectives as a genuine growth for improvement. And what about embracing diversity and inclusivity? Rugby teams often consist of diverse players, each bringing unique strengths, and Scrum teams too can benefit, I think, from this diversity in skills, perspectives, and backgrounds. On the photograph, you see there Sia Khaleesi, the captain of the Springboks, not only the second captain of a rugby team ever to raise the Rugby World Cup trophy in back-to-back wins, but also the first person of colour to captain the South African team, the Springboks. Imagine the 1995 win. I think Nelson Mandela would have been brought to tears if he saw the first scene and if he was still with us. So stronger together, representation means so much to kids growing up in townships. And another broader lesson, celebrating successes. Just as rugby teams can celebrate their victories, Scrum teams should also take the time to acknowledge and celebrate their victories. What about maintaining focus under pressure? Rugby teams are trained to maintain focus under intense pressure. Scrum teams can learn from this, staying focused on their goals in high pressure situations, making sure they don't lose sight of objectives. And I want to insert a joke here, if I may. In rugby, success is not about how well you defend the ball, but it's how hard you try. I know it's Christmas. So stronger together. As we move forward as one, and just to close off some thought-provoking questions, how can we as a Scrum Master and a coach embrace the spirit of a rugby team in our next sprint? What lessons from rugby can we apply to enhance collaboration, strategy, and performance so that we can also make our teams feel like champions? Apologies for going a few seconds over there, but
you're okay.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Deidré. Well done. We are going to go straight on because we have 2 more speakers who need to be bang on 10 minutes each. So, James, the threat of what's going to happen if you're not on time, just think about that. So, if you want to go next, your 10 minutes starts now.
Is that you motivating me with a stick?
Yeah.
Carrot. Great. Hi, everyone. So, this talk is essentially, well, it's size isn't everything. So I've got a question, and I just want you to think about this for now. But why do we estimate? Why do teams estimate? And if I mention something which is different, or I don't get to cover something which is on your mind, then please stick it in the chat. I would love to hear other reasons why people estimate. But I think it all comes down to confidence. And so the 3 most common things that I see are, we want to have an understanding of capacity. So if we've got an available amount of people or skills for an upcoming period of time, how much stuff should we be planning for to happen, to take place within that next sprint or time period? Kind of related, but I'm going to treat it differently, which is perhaps we might be estimating an entire backlog or volume of work that could be done. I've certainly done this plenty of times with teams, looking at a whole list of requirements, coming up with some kind of a size estimate, and then building a contract around those. I call that out separately than simply capacity planning for an upcoming period, because this one is one of the most wasteful activities that we do. Because I mean, if you've ever been in that situation where you've been estimating with teams a whole backlog of work, of those times, I mean, how often could you say you've actually delivered everything that was estimated? I would wager quite often. So it's incredibly wasteful. We're spending time talking about things that we never actually get around to deliver. And then the third most common one about why we estimate is simply to develop a shared understanding. So do we within a team have a shared understanding of the requirement, the problem, the experiment that we might be carrying out? Does one person think it's super easy and somebody else think it's super hard? So sometimes people believe that having a discussion about those can draw out some of those conversations. All of them come down to confidence. So why is it then that we put so much stock in the amount of confidence that we can get when we estimate work, when we know the least amount of possible knowledge that we could have about those items? So if we're estimating things before we started them, we're estimating them at a time when we know the least about them. And so I would set you a challenge. You're working with teams and you are going through some process of estimation. Doesn't matter whether it's story points or sizes of shark. I would ask you to take a look at your data and have a look about whether there's to try and find out whether there's a correlation between the size that something was estimated and the length of time that it actually took to deliver. And that's a really interesting point, I believe, anyway, because when we're estimating work, we tend to be estimating the amount of effort that it's going to take to complete something, which is a completely different question to the one that probably matters to our customers the most of all, which is how long is it going to take to get the thing? Effort doesn't equate to length of time that something takes to go from the start of a process to the end. So I've got something to share with you. And what's that? 4 minutes into the talk, I could essentially say that I'm done, right? In the meeting chat, and I'll share a screen as well. In the meeting chat, I've just dropped in a formula. It looks like this. And this is how you can correlate it. This is how you can correlate your data. But I mean, how rubbish would that be if I just gave you a formula and it just said go away and analyze it? So hopefully you can still see me on your screen because something weird has happened on Zoom for me. But in a nutshell, what this formula does is it's a way of correlating to aspects, to data points. So if this is story size, and you've got big stuff versus little stuff, and this axis here is length of time that it's taken to complete it. So this is not very long at all, a short amount of time, and this is a long amount of time. What that formula would do, I'm clearly not going to explain it any more than this, is it just correlates, it looks to find whether there is a correlation or no correlation between the lower end of our scale. So do the things that are sized the smallest, take the least amount of time to complete, versus those at the other end of the scale. It's much more complicated than that, but it gives you a number, and that number can give you a sense of how pointless is this. That's a really good scientific way to do it, but I am personally not a mathematician. I'm very visual. So a way that I think it's much easier to look at this stuff is just to take a look at your data. Somebody shout if you can't see a screen with some dots on it. I don't want to spend too much time explaining this thing because I've done that in videos, and I'm becoming more active on LinkedIn sharing stuff about this. So if you're really not familiar with this, I would urge you to just look me up or search what a cycle time scatter plot is. But what this shows us is each dot represents some completed piece of work. And we can analyze this. And a very easy way to do that is if you happen to be assigning story points, if I was just to change the color of one of them, so if I just say that anything which was sized as a 1 story point and I make that yellow, I'll just get rid of that for now. You can see this stuff, these dots here, that the higher up a dot is, the longer it took to complete in the system. That's all this is. So you can see a cluster of them over here and a cluster of them in the middle. And we can do that for all of our colors. So if one is at our smaller end of the scale, what is it at our larger end of the scale? So I'll do these 13 points. I close that. You can see the smattering here. But what strikes me is that there is no hard and fast rule here about the things which were perceived to be larger or more complex than something else always being at the top end of our scale. In fact, some of these ones which are the smallest took the same amount of time to complete as some of those larger ones. So the point being, this is just some representative data. You should inspect your own. I wouldn't be surprised if you found out that there is little to no correlation between how big something was sized and how long it took to get through your system. And so what can you do? I don't want to spend too much time talking about these, but these dotted lines that I'm bringing up now are percentiles. So it's saying that 50% of the time, all of the work, regardless of how big or small it was, 50% of all of the work that we're visualizing here completed in 6 days or less, and 85% of them completed in 15 days or less. And so what we can do with this is there's just two things that I'm asking for people. The takeaway of all of this is to do two things. Prioritize completion of the thing which has started soonest. So pay attention to work item age and right size. So if you are expecting me to say, well, there's no point in estimating because it's a load of rubbish, arguably I am still asking some sense of estimating. And if a team has said, well, we're happy being right 80%, 85% of the time, and so 85% of the time, work has taken 15 days or less to complete, the only conversation that this team would need to have if that was their target is, okay, this thing that we're going to do, that is the most valuable thing that we could be doing in the future, can we complete it in 15 days or less? And if the answer is yes, doesn't matter if it's 1 day or 15, if the answer is yes, we think we can complete this in 15 days or less, there is no point having any more conversations about it. You start that work. It's the most valuable thing that you could be doing at that point in time. But you need to be managing work item age. And that's what I'm representing here. So instead of looking at the completed work items, this is looking at all of those things which are currently in progress in the system. Thanks for the minute warning. So, quick question then. If this was your system, this is all the work which is in progress, where would you focus your efforts? If you would highlight these things over on the right-hand side, that's totally understandable because it's often what we do when we visualize work. We try to get the things furthest over the right-hand side out of the system because that's closest to the end of our workflow. That's totally reasonable. But my argument is saying, well, actually, this is the thing that we should be focusing on because this one has been active for 20 days. And the longer that it stays active for, the older it will get and the worse that is overall for our system. So we should have conversations like, well, why is it stuck? What could we do to unblock it? And there are things that you could do. You could go into the percentiles here. So if that 85th percentile was a target, 15 days or less, as soon as something is crossing that 50th percent, then we've really got an early warning indicator to say, well, we're at risk of breaching our expectation of how long something's going to take to go through our system.
Great. That's you just on time, James.
Cool.
All right, few extra seconds. Thanks very much. Okay, so a lot of information. There are a few talks on the AMI YouTube as well that James has talked about that stuff as well, and on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. And very last, I do want to get, because Martin has prepared a talk for us today on long-lived or dynamic teams. So I'll go straight to yourself, Martin.
Thanks very much, folks. Thanks for sticking around. There's no slide share here, so if you want to put me on big screen, you can. If you don't, I fully understand. The inspiration for this short talk came from a situation at work, actually, in the last couple of weeks. It started off as a conversation which was going around, then it turned into an email response, grew a bit, so I turned it into a potential article, then a short presentation to get the person's attention, and finally this talk. So it's had a little bit of a journey over the last fortnight. Long-lived or dynamic teams. In Scrum, we're guided that the Scrum team has all the skills necessary to complete the work. So like that rugby team we just heard about, which inspired Scrum, the team members do everything necessary to develop their product. So when that game's in play, the team members, they don't raise a request to the hooker, thanks for that, Deidré, to get some work done. They just go to the work. They've got it all under their control, and they're fully empowered to go to where the work is. Of course, they have the specialist skills, but they'll follow the game, and that's the inspiration for a Scrum team. However, the reality in a big organization will mean that this inspired model is really absolutely the case. Dependencies or handoffs outside the team are going to be there somewhere, and Scrum will surface the effects of these dependencies and invite us to question what we're prepared to tolerate, because I think, of course, we're all going to tolerate some. Let me give you a couple of examples. Cybersecurity is a specialist function usually. So I bet that in most development teams, you won't have the cybersecurity specialist in the team. Instead, you'll pull that specialism in when needed, maybe from a central pool, if the organization is big enough, or perhaps from an external supplier. You manage the dependency. You know that there's going to be some waiting time, and that's fine. You take that hit because you know that it makes sense from a whole system perspective that it's just not going to be economic to keep cybersecurity specialists in every development team. Something a bit more variable, perhaps like database engineering. Well, I've seen this skill centralized too. And if your team rarely makes database changes, then that's okay. It too can be treated as a dependency outside of the team. However, if your work changes, so you're starting to make more and more frequent alterations to the DBs, then that occasional cost is going to start to bite harder. So imagine every other sprint, you need to make a database change and it's centralized. Every other sprint, you're going to get delayed. Every other sprint, you're not fully in control of your own work. So you're going to want to solve that. And you look at how to embed that skill in the team. It might just be a temporary secondment thing, or it might be a long-term permanent need, in which case you're looking at a new hire or upskilling an existing member. Now, the traditional model which Scrum teams, I think, implicitly seek to follow is that of long-lived, stable teams, often using Tuckman's norming, storming, forming, the one we all know about. And there are definitely established positives to this. You'll get deep product knowledge in the team. You'll get multi-person cover. They've got each other's back. The team will enjoy focus and flow and hopefully mature social bonds and high levels of trust. When the technology changes significantly, you've got to think what to do there. I've seen firsthand where stable teams have been supported by their organization to go through a pretty big upskilling process, full tech stack upgrade, front and back code changes, new UX, new APIs, all at the same time. I was in a team that learned all of that pretty much from scratch. It took more than a year, so it didn't come cheap. I generally believe, though, that the results of doing that are good. They've always been good in my experience, the ones I've seen. I've seen businesses restore lost competencies, which have literally walked out the door with the source code and they've had to reverse engineer their product to get it back, adding another 5 to 10 years to that product's life cycle. I've seen engineering prowess be built up and genuine centers of excellence to future-proof the organization's competitive advantage. Great examples of investing in long-lived teams. However, the thing with stable teams is they stabilize. So their effectiveness can plateau and it can create new silos. Team A operates this way, but Team B operates another way. That's not good for the organization as a whole. And it can become stale because when a team has conquered something, found a solution to something they're comfortable with, it's going to take effort to revisit that. Why would they change it further? They're happy. Without frequent stimulus, inertia can kick in. The team learning is happening as they conquer their own problems, but the essential cross-pollination doesn't. Now, there's another way to look at teams, though, isn't there? Think about airline cabin crew. They don't work as long-lived teams. In fact, in a major carrier, the chances are the crew on that particular flight will have never all worked together before, not all of them, and may never all work together again. Instead, they know their role and they come together on the day, adhering to clear operating procedures, knowing that their colleagues are going to adhere to those same procedures, and it works perfectly. I've also had the joy of watching the builders finishing the houses around here the last couple of years. These are, specialist tradespersons which come together. They form a virtual team at the moment, but there's a bit more variance and adaptation needed. The decorator comes to do the outside, but it's raining. So what does he do? He's going to use his time on a different house, on a different job, maybe a piece of warranty work. So they're good at working together as specialists in a virtual team, but they also know how to respond to change. So dynamic reteaming is deliberately altering the members of the team to achieve potentially separate things. And I'm going to reference two sources of work here. One, this is a picture of the front of a book that I haven't read, but it's called Dynamic Teaming by an author called Heidi Helfland. So take a screenshot of that if you're interested. I guess there's some useful stuff in there about dynamic reteaming, but that's where the title comes from. And also another source of work which I've followed for a few years now since I first saw it was from a guy called Doc Norton, who's a conference speaker and got plenty on his websites and YouTube. As he puts it, you could change the members in a team for reasons of socialization. Okay, so this is where a team makes a concerted effort to practice onboarding new members so that they're good at it and it becomes an easy barrier when somebody wants to join. Mitosis, or simply grow and split. So it's where a team grows until it's large enough to split, and then the newly formed team is already accustomed to working together. It's a bit like when you chop a worm in half. I think, well, don't do that at home, it's cruel. Volunteer fire crew is another one he mentions, where people get together from different teams for a short-term exercise to solve a particular problem, and then they rejoin their own team. And the last one is trading places, where they deliberately rotate people around through teams in order to spread knowledge throughout the organization. And I'd add another one to this, and I'd simply call it evolution. If the nature of the work is to change for a period of time or to change in a new direction, then what's the strategic, and the emphasis on the strategic there, what's the strategic approach for adjustments to simply making sure that the skills in the team meet the type of demand? Organizations have found different ways to approach this. Valve Software is a company that apparently had teams that literally self-selected based on the work in front of them, and they walked towards the cards and formed a team a sprint at a time. That worked for them. High degree of job security, I think, needed for that, but it worked. Spotify famously had their tribes, chapters, and guilds as deliberately created forums to avoid the team silo effect. So the invitation here is just to think about what your goals are in your organization. Consider what you want and what might work for you, taking inspiration from any of these models, but be deliberate about it. Doing something which is not deliberate when you form a team. So perhaps trying to cover the varying need with bits of people's time here and there, made up percentages, asking them to split their time across teams and saying, well, we'll manage the dependency. It's probably not going to work too well. I'd say it's better to be deliberate in your choice about how you're building up the team. So think, or help your organization to think, does it want long-lived, stable teams with the kind of benefits I described earlier? And if so, are they actually prepared to invest long-term in those individuals? Because the examples I worked with, I want to point out that there was substantial amounts of time spent learning, supporting that training and upskilling. Individuals were not loaned out to other teams during that period. They were not kept busy. Management didn't fret about their productivity. It was all taken off the table whilst the deep learning was given time to establish and get up to speed. In choosing a vision like that, you're saying that, like that sports team, the members in the team will go to work, whatever type of work is needed. They'll learn how to exchange competencies with each other, and they build up that deep knowledge across many types of work. If they've been recruited with particular roles, then be careful, because job titles can get in the way of that. If you give someone a job description such as software tester, then what are they most likely to do? They're not going to go and learn how to do REST APIs, for example, even if that's what's most needed. If, however, the goal is less to build stable, long-lived teams, but rather to simply have teams which are capable of responding to the types of work in the moment, which might evolve and change over time, plus paying deliberate attention to lowering those team silo effects, then you might want to consider a more dynamic approach to the team. Look ahead, strategically change some of the members to suit the upcoming work. Consider the target state that you want for those teams and their personnel. Do you want those deep centers of excellence that give you a competitive advantage over the long term? Or do you just need to get through the portfolio as it stands year on year? Each is okay. Consider if resource utilization is a goal, a pull, because it's generally not a good idea, but you might not be in a place where your organization can afford to pay for deep learning at this moment, and actually getting a return on investment on the cost of the staff is a real imperative. So I'll leave it with you. It's a short talk, nothing particularly new in there, but hopefully the package of it sort of was worth spending a few minutes on. Just know that dynamic reteaming is an option. It's not a revolving door of bit players trying to make it up as you go, visiting contributors, imaginary percentages of people's time. That's way too much churn to the approach of building an effective team. Dynamic reteaming works best when it's a conscious choice rather than a tactical reaction to plugging a gap that you might have missed, or when the world has changed significantly. So that was
Great
it.
stuff.
It's just some food for thought on different ways to build up your Scrum teams. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Barton. You went over 30 seconds there and you're on the naughty list. All right, folks, thank you so much for everybody who hung around for the extra few minutes. Our next talk in January will be Geoff Watts talking about sympathy for the devil, how the dark side isn't as dark as you might think. The date is to be confirmed. It will be published on the AMI meetup, so please do keep your eye out for that. It'll be really interesting. Just to say thank you so much to all of our speakers today. These were all amazing, so give them a big round of applause. Woo! And from all of us at AMI meetup, we just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, whatever way that you celebrate this time. We all hope you have a lovely break and enjoy the time. And we will see you in the new year, bright, fresh, and ready to go. So thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.